Okay, we're continuing with the 1920s, Cultural Diversity and Conflict, Part 5, I think. The Evolution Controversy. I don't know if it's Part 5. I'm losing track of them. I've got 2 or 3 on the griddle right now. Okay, I think the mainstream population, the theory of evolution is kind of dwelling kind of on what was considered the fringe. Okay, maybe intellectuals, pointy-headed people like that. And so the general public was only gradually became, I think, aware of it. But it put mainstream denomination ministers, preachers, clergymen into an increasingly tight spot. They tended to be well-educated men who placed great value on their respectability, intellectual respectability, their educational credentials, such as that, more emphasis than it probably deserved. And increasingly, you can't actually believe the main biblical doctrines and get away with it and still be considered intellectually respectable. So, what are they going to do? Evolution is the curveball, it's going to kill them. So, they tended to sacrifice their maybe earlier beliefs and try to keep up with the times and try to resolve conflicts between evolution and the Genesis creation account, things like that. So by the 1910s, along in there, increasingly there were laymen, and these are just people who go to church, who were noticing this drift on the part of the men in the pulpit. And around 1911, 2 laymen, that means they were not ordained ministers, published a pamphlet on what they call the 5 fundamentals. I don't remember the title of it. I don't think I've ever actually seen a copy of it, but these were 5 biblical ideas that they proposed. If you don't subscribe to all 5 of them, you need to, stop designating yourself as a Christian. And they've got the divine creation, they've got original sin, they got the virgin birth, things like that. And so this launches something called fundamentalism, a word that is no longer really useful to us because it means too many different things to too many different people. But it was a big deal in the teens going into the 20s. Okay, the teaching of Darwin's theories in public schools got to be an issue. All right, there was a very high-profile individual who took up arms against it. That would be longtime Democratic Party politician named William Jennings Bryan. He had been their unsuccessful presidential nominee 3 times in something like 1896, 1900, and 1908. He had served briefly under President Wilson as Secretary of State, but he was such a pacifist he made Wilson look like a hawk and resigned in protest of Wilson's protests. By the 1920s, he's an older gentleman, generally retired, and he went around meeting with state legislatures, pleading with them to get them to prohibit by state law the teaching of evolution in the public schools. He didn't have any luck until in 1925, I think it was, the state of Tennessee enacted such a law, which was ridiculed as the monkey law because allegedly Darwin said that human beings were descended from monkeys. Okay. Now, there was a newly formed organization called the American Civil Liberties Union. They took exception to this law, thought it was unconstitutional, and they began looking for somebody who would be willing to mount a court challenge. The way you do that is by breaking the law. You got to break the law, you got to get arrested, tried, and get convicted. That's part of your game plan. You got to get convicted because you're going to appeal the conviction based on a challenge to the constitutionality of the law. Got that? Well, they found a football coach and, according to the video I posted, and part-time science teacher in a town called Dayton, Tennessee, named John Scopes, young guy, recent graduate of Yale University, no less. What he's doing in Dayton, I couldn't tell you. But so he agrees to do this. There's a whole other thing going on another level. two forces probably don't even know each other exist. Dayton, Tennessee's economy had hit the skids. Things were not going that well for the town. It seems to be in decline. So the town leaders were looking for some way to boost the local economy. This came to light relatively recent times. So they thought, well, you know what? Maybe if we could have a high-profile trial, that'd bring people to town to spend money. But nobody wants to volunteer to be a murder victim or anything like that. So maybe a trial about the evolution would work. So John Scopes, with his backing from the ACLU, stepped up and volunteered to do this. Everybody's complicit. So after announcing it several times in advance, I'm told he was a substitute teacher. I'd never heard that before, but he read a portion of the textbook they were using that had to do with Darwin's theory of evolution. Okay, it's part of the plan. He got arrested and indicted for breaking the so-called monkey law, and the trial was set for July 1925. Did it work? From a financial standpoint, yes, it did. People increasingly flocked to Dayton to watch this. A large number of newspapers sent correspondents. Eventually, there were some from foreign countries, and the trial lasted something like, 8 days? And the courtroom quickly was overflowing, so they moved the trial outside. They didn't have air conditioning yet, so they just moved it out into the trees and conducted it outside. Now, some high-profile people came up. William Jennings Bryan couldn't stay away, so he appeared volunteering to assist the prosecution. And the number one trial lawyer in the United States, a man named Clarence Darrow, volunteered to defend John Scopes pro bono. That means for free. And so you got him there. And he's not the only defense attorney, but he's the main one. So the video I posted probably does a decent job of telling you what's going on. You can get a little of the bias here. I actually posted two videos. One was an old newsreel. I think it looked old. It had actual footage of the trial. Put up a History Channel, and there it's just got bias oozing out of it. That it fully buys into the idea that the people who oppose evolution are the ignoramuses that H.L. Mencken called them, and that science won and the theory of creation was dead. I put that up mainly so you can see the original footage. Oh, and it gets its information from a play called Inherit the Wind, which is written about this trial, and it's loosely based. The character names are not the same as the real people, and it has this dramatic scene where Bryan agrees to take the witness stand as an expert on the biblical record of creation. And in the play, Inherit the Wind, Darrow just pelts him and pummels him with all these seemingly difficult, hard to answer questions, supposed inconsistencies about the creation story, and that Bryan is just reduced to blubbering dementia practically, and he really did die 5 days later. Well, that was a diversionary, the whole play, but the video had bought that as if that were real. The actual court reporter's transcript of the trial paints a different picture. That really it's going to be hard to ask William Jennings Bryan a question that he hasn't heard before. So he's fending off these questions right and left, cool as a cucumber, as cool as you can be out there in July. And it was actually Darrow who became flustered and frustrated and angry, and he starts popping off saying stuff that offended probably most of the people watching it and millions of people across the country. So that's kind of the opposite of what the play showed. Darrow, but the newspaper coverage, this is not court reporter level stuff. I mean, they're just trying to outdo each other, poking scorn and fun and ridicule at these ignorant hayseed hicks who are so superstitious they still believe the book of Genesis. I mean, I thought this was the 20th century. Now, from the hayseed hicks perspective, these godless modernists are trying to destroy the basis of the moral fiber of the whole country. Plus, they're already aware of something we're still aware of today. We are the object of contempt. And I guess they think we're supposed to grovel on our bellies and accept that. So, at any rate, um, the school teacher, John Scopes, was convicted and fined $100. One of the videos said that in today's money, that'd be over $1,300. I don't know about that, but backers rushed forward to pay the fine. Now, then the appeal was launched in state courts, went to the state Supreme Court, and according to the video, the court ruled the monkey law constitutional. I'd not heard that before, so I'm not going to endorse that as being true. What did happen was that the conviction was overturned on a procedural technicality, and the so-called monkey law um, survived its court test and remained on the books in Tennessee until it was repealed in 1968. Now, as I said, Brian hung around town a few days. I don't guess I said that. I started to. And the next Sunday, he went to church, got home from church, had Sunday dinner, went up to his hotel room to take a nap, and never did wake up. He died in Dayton, Tennessee, 5 days after the trial ended. So, okay. Now, church attendance seems to have taken a fairly pronounced dip because you have a lot of just marginal attenders who go because they always have, and they're scurrying to avoid association with these, ignorant, superstitious people who believe in Genesis. On the other hand, many other states, and we could outlaw that. So basically, a wave of states enacting laws similar to the one in Tennessee across the country. So it's kind of a draw. But culturally, um, um, it was just not socially acceptable in at least urban areas and supposedly sophisticated social environments to actually believe in creation. Well, so that was over, that was done, those people were part of the past, forget about them. Not so fast. The creationism makes a comeback. As far back as the 1940s, growing as time went by, um, majoring in such things that the science, and of course it's true, science is not a set body of dogmatic information. Science is a process. So science changes its mind quite a bit, so it's vulnerable in that point that any theory they come up with, they're going to change, and then they're going to change it again and again and so on. And there are some logical problems. And so this time the creationists, under the banner of intelligent design, are no longer quoting Genesis because that's just going to bounce off. The approach is considerably more sophisticated. Now, by the end of the 1970s, 4 different states, I don't know which ones, I think they're in the old South, not including Texas, had passed state laws mandating that you could not teach naturalistic evolution without balancing it with biblical creation. Okay? You could teach both, you could teach neither, but you could not teach one to the exclusion of the other. And some said, "Ooh, that's the monkey law reborn." Not so much. Okay? Because the monkey law required one to the exclusion of the other. This outlaws one to the exclusion of the other. Anyway, in 1980, a federal district judge struck down all these laws in one ruling on the grounds that whereas evolution is science, creation is religion, hence inadmissible in the public schools. So I'm going to patch these things together and work on the next part.